All right, buddy. Good luck.
Okay, good. So, good morning, and let's get ready for the session ahead. Certainly more Greek action to look forward to, try and navigate through. And what we have, let's start with the European equity space, and if look at the DAX on the top right, and let's maybe just make this chart a bit bigger and get it on a daily time frame and just see where we are. I was talking about this yesterday, in that we, this phenomenal bounce over the last 4 sessions as the Greek risk reduces, as we get closer to a potential deal, has taken this DAX right up onto the top side of this downward trend channel that's been shaping the kind of risk-off move over the last couple of months.
Just be seeking there to sell Euro benchmark 10-year.
Let me just turn
T2
down
bonds.
my RAM. So, well, of course we did get outside of the channel yesterday, up above it, but importantly closed back within the channel, gave back half of those gains, and this morning, well, just treading water really around about yesterday's close. So we're still sort of flirting with the top side of this channel. If we zoom in now on a 1-hour chart, you'll see that the price action yesterday was, pretty positive, nothing major, but pretty positive through the morning, through the early part of the afternoon, and it was kind of late into the European session that things then came under a bit more pressure. We traded right back down to test the low, just above 11,500, and then that support level settled things down, and we traded into the close mid-range, and we are still there. Okay, so European stocks, slight negative, but around about flat, about the midpoint of yesterday's movement. So it's an important day for Greece. Again, every day seems to be the last ditch, the final day possible to get a deal done, but today is no different. So we have a Eurogroup meeting of finance ministers. This begins at 6 p.m. tonight. What we're hoping for is that before that meeting there is a staff level agreement. So we're hoping that the sort of technical teams representing the creditors and Greece will be working furiously throughout the day, trying to reach a staff level agreement, which can then be used in that finance ministers meeting, and hopefully it gets signed off. Okay, so we are looking, and I imagine that meeting that's tonight will probably be a long one. Well, it depends how much progress they make before it, of course, but may well be a long meeting, and we're looking for a deal to be signed off. Okay, now, one thing of note, obviously going into this meeting, there's going to be headlines flying about, as usual. Now, the biggest and most important headline, and perhaps what led to a bit of downside yesterday, and perhaps is why these European equities are looking a little vulnerable, I think, up at this top, is because Germany have set out their stall, and so what they have said is Germany, and this is from the German press, they've reported, hang on, that's a different story. Hang on, let me talk about this German press story. So they reported that the IMF believes that the European Commission is being too soft on Greece, and some European officials accused the IMF of not wanting a deal. But this contradicts Lagarde's comments yesterday, where she said she was optimistic a deal would be done this week. So not too much in that. But the big story is on Germany. So German Parliament, so this is what we learned yesterday, German Parliament will not approve any deal until approval is first passed through the Greek Parliament. So we spoke a lot about this yesterday. This political crisis, if you like, is going to turn from a European political risk into a internal Greek political risk. So we're expecting a deal to be signed off today or tonight or early hours of tomorrow morning, and then basically Tsipras has got till Monday to get this voted through Greek Parliament. Now that is a big task, and of course Tuesday is the date where Greece have got to cough up and pay 1.6 billion euros to the IMF. So we have a fast approaching deadline. Now, I would actually say it's unlikely. I'd say it's below 50% likely that Tsipras can get this through Greek Parliament by Monday. We spoke about this yesterday. Now, if he fails to get it through the Parliament, that doesn't mean Greece won't pay and they default, because really it then comes down to the ECB. And will the ECB need enough evidence that the political process is happening and they're confident the Greek Parliament is going to vote this through, and then the ECB can buy them a bit more time by raising the T-bill ceiling, allowing Greece to auction off some more T-bills to get this IMF payment done. And really all this is, it's shifting more of the debt exposure off the IMF books and shifting it across onto the Eurozone books. So what we're going to need to see is that it's going to be a huge weekend for Greek politics, and depending on how much progress is made, the ECB may choose to buy them a lifeline and allow them a T-bill auction, get the IMF bill paid, and then the political process takes longer, of course, and then if they vote it through Greek Parliament, well then the Germans will back it, and then this will release around about 10 billion euros worth of funding that had been earmarked for sort of emergency restructuring of the Greek banking system, but perhaps can be used by the government. Okay, so this is the situation. Now, because of this risk, I think, we've been so bullish and buoyant off the progress made this week, and a deal's going to be done, but now we've got the risk that actually it doesn't matter if a deal's done or not. Even if one is done, then it still doesn't mean this crisis is solved. We have a Greek political risk ahead of us. So this is probably going to tip the balance, I would say. Looking for perhaps some of this huge rally on European stocks to just be given back as we go through today. Now we have a gap here on the DAX. This is the gap between Monday's high, 11,489, and Tuesday's low, which is a double bottom, 11,522. This is a 32.5 point gap, and we're approaching it as I speak. The bottom end of this gap is also S1. The top of the gap is S1. That's a good technical level. I'd expect that to get broken and the gap to be filled. You've got a similar but smaller gap on Euro stocks. In fact, it's a tiny gap of about 8 ticks if you look. So the gap is Monday's high to Tuesday's low. Okay, so I would say you might get a bit of nervousness now, as yes, we've priced in a deal being agreed, but now it shifts to a risk of whether Tsipras can get it through Parliament or not. If we, and you can see this morning we got a little bit of negativity on European stocks, and we got some positivity on safe haven bonds. So the Bund has ticked up through yesterday's high. If I just add a line in here, so yesterday's high was at 150.85. We've been up through that. We went up to test the 151 handle. It's been a little bit choppy here in the first hour of trade, but the Bund now back at, just as the DAX and Euro stocks are just drifting back towards the yesterday's lows, you're seeing the Bund lift up. So we're getting a decent inverse correlation here again between these two assets. Now checking on the euro. Now the euro is positive this morning, having been pretty violently negative. Maybe violent's the wrong word, but really big day yesterday. If you go onto the daily chart, check out the size of the big red candle that took us right down to kind of test the low points from the 12th of June, which we did break. But we're now lifted, and this market's trying to clamber back higher and make up for yesterday's losses. Now, a lot of this was dollar related, with dollar strength notable across the spectrum, and we had some data yesterday, of course, from the US, which was mixed because the durable goods data was worse than expected. The manufacturing number was slightly worse, but then the housing data was very strong. So mixed bag on the data front, but it was more Fed's Powell's comments that was the main catalyst for dollar strength yesterday. And Powell, well, he's neutral officially, and so because he came in with what you describe as mildly hawkish comments, or perhaps not even mildly, I mean, he said, on my radar, September's liftoff date with perhaps another rate hike in December. So if you've got a neutral guy on that committee being that hawkish, then what happened yesterday was an increase in the expectation of a September hike. And we spoke about this, with regards to the Greek situation. As the Greek risk perhaps looks like it might get removed, well, this is something the Fed have been mentioning in their statements, international factors and Greece specifically. If that global risk gets removed, well then this perhaps opened the door for the Fed to make that hike. We also have third reading on GDP from the US, third and final reading for quarter one. We'll talk about this more later, of course, but we're expecting it to be revised higher. It was minus 0.7%, and we're expecting it to be revised to minus 0.2%, and with an outside chance that it gets revised to zero, i.e. actually quarter one, we didn't see a contraction in the US economy. So that would be also supportive of the Fed making a move sooner rather than later. All right, what I'm going to do now, because we've got the most important data release of the morning coming in 10 minutes, so I'm just going to shift my attention to that. Look at the data calendar. So this is German IFO, it's a business climate number. This is definitely an important reading out of Germany. This is a business sentiment survey. We're expecting it to come in pretty much the same as last month, so 108.1 is expected, and 108.5 was last month's reading. There's two components here: the business climate and the current assessment, and then the expectations. Okay, the business climate is basically it's roughly speaking the average of the current assessment and the expectations. So this is where business leaders in Germany get surveyed on a monthly basis. How do you feel about the economic conditions for your business right now? So that's the current assessment component. And then what are your expectations? How do you feel about economic conditions panning out over the next 6 months? And is this favourable for your business or not? So this is the expectations reading, and of the components, it's the expectations number that's more important. But the overall business climate reading is basically the average, roughly, between the two. Okay. Let me show you the chart on this. Let me just update that. So look what's happened here. Real dive on this reading into the end of last year, and then a slow but surely rebound and a nice solid trend, which perhaps given last month's number has just run out of steam. So we had last month's reading was below the month before, and that was the first time since November last year that we had a reading lower than the month before. Okay, now let me just put this on a slightly longer time frame. If you take this chart back to 2007, well, you can see that where we are now, around the 108 area, it's about mid-range for the last 5 years, really. Okay, so it's nothing too exciting here. And if we are to see the number come in 108.1 as expected, well, that's below last month, so that will be 2 months in a row of declining IFO data. Although, there's not, if it is as expected, 108.1 is basically the same as the last previous 2 months. So we're really looking for a confirmation that the uptrend of the last 7 or 8 months has run out of steam, and we've plateaued and we're flattening off. Now, of course, this is a survey, 7,000 firms across sectors, so manufacturing, construction, wholesaling, retail, etc. They all get surveyed. So this is a sentiment survey. You're asking people how they feel. These are company CEOs. Now, of course, things like the Greek risk can definitely come in and have a dominant effect over how people feel, their emotional feelings towards this crisis. And so there's certainly a risk here that this number is damaged by the Greek risk. But you might say, well, hang on, we've seen a turn in the corner on that risk. But this survey wasn't conducted this week. It was pretty sure it was conducted last week, So really before the real proper positive momentum started to come in on the Greek scenario. So you may well see that this figure is influenced by Greece and comes in lower than expected. Okay, so this data is going to get announced in 5 minutes. The DAX and Euro stocks are testing the key bottom from yesterday's session. So, you know, definitely numbers worse than expected here, and you're going to get a breakout to the downside. We're going to see these gaps being filled. Okay, so you're going to get equities lower. You'll get the Bund moving in the opposite direction to equities. Of course, actually a better than expected number here might be a more surprising result given the Greek risk, and you know, a lot of people are thinking that is going to weigh on this survey, and that, you know, most likely, if anything, we're going to get a number that's below expectation. For the euro, how's the euro going to respond to this? To be honest, I don't know. Being totally honest, we've had really unusual behaviour for this euro, and definitely yesterday, you know, as equity markets, as risk on was buoyant off the Greek improvement in the Greek crisis, the euro came under heavy pressure. You know, a lot of that was dollar strength, but the euro was definitely weak yesterday. The euro weakened quite a lot against the pound, for example. So you had euro weakness in the mix yesterday. So whether or not we can get, you know, we've got the euro pushing higher up above the pivot level here, reclaiming some of those losses from yesterday. Good data, and you know, naturally you'd think, well, the euro is going to appreciate in value. Bad data, it's going to sell off, and that would probably be the instant sort of knee-jerk reaction. But be careful about any follow-through on that knee-jerk reaction. Don't forget about the sort of inverse correlation we've got going on with European equities. So let's see how this data comes in. It's due in 3.5 minutes, and this is, I'll just quickly show you the rest of the calendar. This is really the only data of the morning. And we do have some GDP data this afternoon, as I mentioned, from the US. We got the oil data as well, so we'll talk about that, of course, this afternoon. And then we've got various meetings going on. Of course, the big one starts at 6 p.m., but we are seeing Tsipras meeting with Draghi and Juncker and the IMF, and that's due at 1 o'clock. Oh no, sorry, Juncker's due to speak at 1 o'clock ahead of the Eurogroup meeting. So that'll be interesting. Constancio from the ECB also speaking at 3 o'clock. So keep your ear to the ground on Greek headlines as they come down. But first of all, let's see how this German iPhone number comes in, and we'll go from there. All right, enjoy the day.